Hi, everybody. This is Loren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. And with me today, I have John Shehata of Conde Nast. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, Loren, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. And thanks again for popping in on our SEJ Summit a couple weeks ago. It was great to have you and Pos talk about everything that's happening in the world of Google and news and adding on to news. I know it was a quick 10 minutes, but always great to have you.
It was a great conversation, actually. I was talking to a partner and saying, hey, we could continue to talk about this for an hour or more. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So I see we have some folks on already, some likes and some hearts. So thank you for that. This is the first early morning SEJ show I've done, 9 o'clock here on the Best Coast, and noon, I believe. And you're in Jersey, right, John? Right
outside New York? Jersey, yes. Jersey boy, all the way.
Okay, awesome. So, John, how about if you introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get into chit-chatting.
Sure. So, John Shehata, I've been doing SEO for almost 21 years now. I am the global VP of Audience Development Strategy and CRM at Conde Nast. If you're not familiar with Conde Nast, these are all the premium, amazing magazines like Wired, New Yorker, Vogue, GQ, and so many more. I'm also the founder of NewzDash with a Z, which is a news analytics platform that helps publishers boost their visibility in Google Top Stories and Google News.
Excellent. And I'm glad you bring up Google Top Stories and Google News, because just like with Google Video Search and YouTube, there are differences, right, and nuances between everything. And then, of course, SEJ, we're in Google News. We've been in Google News since it began, and we've been privileged enough to get some of that Discover traffic as well, which has been a surprise thus far. We've optimized for Discover as best as we can from an image perspective. We've tested it. We've tested with AMP, without AMP. It seems early on we were getting a better result with AMP, but we've been able to get a little bit without AMP as well, especially once those images line up. Would you be kind enough to go over a little bit about what Google Discover is,
Sure,
how it's important, and if there's any way to plan for that onslaught of traffic when it happens?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, Google Discover, I've been focused on it since maybe last year. I've been trying to test different things and different approaches. So Google Discover is Google social platform in a nutshell, right? This is your Google, your Facebook wall, right? But it's based on your interests, your search history, what topics are you searching for or relevant to you. The majority of the Google Discover, I would say 95%, is new and fresh content. But once you start looking for evergreen topics, let's say you're looking for a mortgage, right? Then evergreen content start popping into your Google Discover feed, right? It's like, hey, top best mortgages, or how to find the best mortgage in your state, and so on, right? So Google keeps updating your feed with a mix of mostly new and fresh content or trending content, and at the same time evergreen content. It has been a blessing for so many publishers, especially in Europe. In Europe, we can see up to maybe 50%, 60% in Google Search Console of their traffic is coming from Discover, which is huge. 60%, imagine that, right? Also for niches, I found around sports, where the fans are very highly engaged with sports. Sports publishers get a ton of traffic from Discover, and so on. And in Europe specifically, because of the Android saturation within the market, so it comes by default, the Google Discover feed on your Android feed, but also now it's in the Chrome apps and stuff like this. So yeah, Google Discover is amazing, but it's addictive as well. So it gets yeah.
I did not realize that the European market is seeing more Google Discover traffic than in the US. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just a beta test, or do you think it's a behavior perspective, more mobile, more checking?
It's Android consumption.
Android. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's more Android phones over there, and by default, Google is on the Android phones, and you get the Discover immediately. On iPhone, you have to find it or download the Chrome app to get it. It's not very clear how you get it. I think recently, can't remember, was it John Mueller or Danny Sullivan mentioned that they're gonna start including the Chrome and web traffic numbers into Discover, which means that it didn't have it all, right? It had a part of the Google Discover traffic. So you would expect now another boost in the traffic numbers like a week or 2 weeks ago.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Yeah, it didn't even dawn on me, the Android market share being much larger, right? I was actually doing a global a global market share the other day report, and I'm very Apple centric. How about you, John? Are you Apple or Android, or do you have just everything? Huh? What's that?
No, I would say like phones and devices, it's all Apple. But like when it comes to like laptops, everything is PCs and Google Suites. So I have a mix of the two. Yeah.
Cool. That's actually probably not that difficult. I have difficulty jumping off of like an iMac and then maybe onto a Windows device, and I just don't know what I'm doing. Going from having that split between mobile and pocket devices and then computers, old-fashioned computers, I guess, is a good split. Yeah, I was doing some research, and the global cell market share, I think it was like 26% Samsung, Apple and Huawei and a couple of other companies are tied with like around 11%. So I'm so Google or Apple centric being in the US, sometimes it's really easy to forget how dominant, I was in Russia a couple of years ago visiting my in-laws, and one of their friends, their entire house was Samsung operated. It was like a Samsung smart house, right? It was like, oh wow, this is it's not just a Samsung smart house, it's a Google smart house. This is before Nest and everything else. So
it's huge overseas, and in the Middle East as well.
Yeah, so very cool. So okay, that makes much more sense. So there's a lot. Publishers are seeing much more traffic from Discover in Europe. Now, is Discover, I remember a while back there was an Android newsstand app, I believe, that you could sign up through. Was it Google Publisher Network, Google Publisher Center at the time? Yeah, we were seeing a lot of traffic from that when we signed up to be part of that newsstand distribution, and were approved. Was that a precursor to Discover, or is it two different things?
I think it's two different things. I think the Google News Publisher Center still exists now. It offers publishers ways to manage their accounts, their logos, their feeds, and so on. But at the same time, offer monetization opportunities through like AMP or feeds or complete content within the newsstand. So you have the two options: either an AMP link that takes you into an article, app viewer article, but on your page through the AMP URL, or similar to Apple News, you can view the whole article there.
Okay, nice. So is there a way that you can optimize for Google Discover? Like once you get that hit of traffic, how do you get it again?
All right. So let me start by saying that Google more than once said there is no way to optimize for Google Discover, right? So there are things that you can do around Google Discover, but it's not like a search query driven where you can understand the queries and so on. It's based on topics of interest and history and heavily personalized. That's why they say you cannot optimize for it. but you can optimize around images. And Google recently said, hey, it's better to use this kind of ratio and this kind of resolution, high resolution, large images, to have a better visibility in Google Discover. I wrote an article in NewzDash about like all these different specs. So let me send it to you. I don't know if you can share it or not.
Yeah, I'll share it in the comments. I'd be happy.
Yeah, and I have like slides and a video there. But I think the biggest thing you can optimize for Google Discover is by understanding the entities that work well for you, right? So it's no secret. I'm working in a Google Discover analytics tool, which mainly does, it takes all your Google Discover content and start analyzing the entities, right? The same approach using Google NLP, and start telling you, it's like, okay, you really do well when you talk about SEO, right? But then it takes it a step further down, not just SEO, but when you talk specifically about link building and SEO, or when you talk about these kind of celebrities, or when you talk about hair products and stuff like this, right? So by understanding which entities or topics that works well for you, and start working, producing a little bit more of that content, you already have the audience and the interest there. You're just giving them more of that content. So this is one of the things, understanding the audience. Make sure that you include high quality visuals. I have seen that it's interesting what you mentioned. So I did a quick analysis on like a few thousand URLs on Google Discover, and I found maybe 65% of the URLs are still AMP. So I'm not saying it's a prerequisite or anything at all, but still the AMP saturation or inclusion rate is way higher than non-AMP pages. So something to consider. It's faster. In June, also, they introduced a new paragraph in the guidelines for Google Discover about EAT. So a lot of publishers, their Google Discover traffic completely vanished around October of last year. And it happened again after the December core updates.
Okay.
And I think AAT has a big part to do with that, because when you look at these are publishers where there's no information about the publication itself. There is no address, there is no footprint, physical footprint for this publication, right? Their authors have no footprint on social as well, right? It's like, so-and-so wrote this article. You cannot find Joe Smith anywhere, right? It's like he doesn't have a presence on Twitter, doesn't have presence on LinkedIn. So you cannot really trust the publication. You cannot trust the author, right? And the third thing, the type of news that they offer, it's like the thin content. Hey, this celebrity did this today based on Instagram, or there is no context, there is no opinion, there is no in-depth pieces. So a lot of publishers, these kind of publishers, lost almost all their traffic around October and December. And I asked John Mueller on Twitter the other day. I said, do core updates impact Google Discover and Google News? He said, definitely impacts Google Discover. He wasn't sure about Google News. So the EAT is an important factor. It also impacts Google Discover. Another thing also on the article I shared with you is I found that what I'm calling a buzz factor. There is a correlation in US between Twitter engagement and Discover. And I'm not saying it's a causation, but it seems like whatever works well in Twitter, usually up to like, I think the correlation was like 0.92, something like that, extremely high. And I did it twice, the beginning of the year, at the end of the year last year. And I found the correlation went from like 0.92 to 0.96, something like this. So there is a high correlation. So every country is different. For example, in Germany, Twitter is not that big. So what's the buzz factor, right? There must be some kind, because I know Google looks into communities online to determine the buzz around the URL, from Reddit, from comments on the site, from public Facebook pages that they can access, from Twitter fire hose, and so on, right? So I think there is a buzz factor to it. I hope this is helpful.
Yeah, it's actually very helpful. So just to backtrack a little bit, EAT has become more important for Google Discover as a whole. Sites with very poor transparency when it comes to expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness have seen a drop in Google Discover surfacing. Primarily, sites. The whole EAT thing really reminds me of Penguin and Panda when it rolled out, right? Because Penguin and Panda were EAT for links. So if your site has made up people that don't exist, that are writers and authors, or maybe they just don't even have that digital footprint that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
First of all, that's an issue, right? If maybe you're using pseudonyms or something like that, that's an issue with all trustworthiness when it comes to not only news, but to search as a whole and to link authority and things like that, because it does span across almost everything. Now, I know on SEJ, one thing that we did really early on was we enhanced our author pages on the site to have things like interests, making sure the bios are unique, linking to the social profiles from the contributors and authors from their author pages, and then also syncing all of that up within schema markup as well, right? So making sure we have our same as that's linking over to their LinkedIn and their Twitter, and also asking those folks to reciprocate by saying they are an author on LinkedIn, right? Because you need some kind of, I mean, this goes all the way back to Google Plus authorship certification, is the reciprocity, right? Because I can make up things all day, the fake author or whatever, and say, "Oh, John Shehata's he's our new guest author over at GoogleNewsOptimization.org, same as John Shehata, same as John Shehata, Twitter, et cetera, but the reciprocity helps to
absolutely.
The end. And then other things like credentials, alumni of, what your position is, certifications,
awards, all of that kind of stuff. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, all of it's incredibly important from an editorial perspective. And even if you're not a Google News Index site, right? If you're not in Google News at all, you're not a news site, but you are publishing with a blog or you have a content marketing strategy, making sure there's transparency on that front is extremely important.
Yeah. And it gets even more specific, Loren, around like medical content, right? Is like, this is like a must-have. It's not like an option, right? It's like Google becomes very stringent about the quality of content, but also who are the authors, right? So the YMYL, right? Human Your Life kind of content. I even start seeing AAT creeping into like fitness, right? I see content is written by certified trainers or physicians or stuff like this, right? Ranks higher than content that's written by so-and-so, right? So it's getting into different aspects of our daily lives.
And it makes sense. I had that is one thing I've experienced as well, not just from the outside looking in, but from the client consulting side, is there are certain industries that did not used to be associated with health at all. And then now what's happened is there's a gray area, right? So maybe to your point, it is something like bodybuilding, or sports, or personal training, or other forms of wellness, which aren't necessarily traditionally medical or health oriented, but have really become part of that, to the point where a lot of the results, which used to be 100% transactional, are now bringing in various articles from Verywell Health and other Dotdash companies, and Conde and your publications and everything else as well. So congrats on that front. The other thing that you brought up about Discover, which I found to be really interesting, was you had mentioned that Google is, I guess, monitoring trends which happen in different social networks, and that trending of a story can lead to that story surfacing on Google Discover. Was that the point with the social networks?
let me. I want to be very clear.
Okay.
I don't think it's a causation, but I think there's a correlation there between the buzz or the social buzz, as a buzz factor I call it, and what's working well. Now, in US, when I did that study twice, between the articles that we get discover traffic for and 26 other metrics: Facebook engagement, Twitter engagement, traffic from Google News, traffic from Google search, duration, and so on. So the 2 or 3 big ones I saw are like a huge, strong, very strong correlation to Twitter, and also time spent on site. It seems these types of audiences spend more time on site than other sites. So there is like a huge engagement, right? Now, I'm not saying social engagement leads to discover, but I know that top stories, for example, one of the things that they consider, but they like Google denied this a few times, that social is not part of the rankings, even though Bing said, no, we look at social and stuff like this. But I believe social with top stories and discover, social buzz has an impact, has an effect, either correlation or causation. I can't claim that, but there is a strong connection between the two.
Well, I would think that
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay. I would think that with Google utilizing Chrome as a vehicle to measure usability at scale through Chrome UX and Crux, that at the same time they would also be able to, via Chrome behavior, traffic, and then Android devices all going to a story at one time, and targeted traffic, right? Whether it be your followers on Facebook or people that would tweet your story or even your email list, targeted traffic has more value at the end of the day. It stays around longer, clicks around, people that are interested in that topic matter and interested in that brand. So if Google can measure UX components, right, through the crowdsourcing of monitoring what's happening throughout their devices and throughout Chrome, I would also imagine that that influx of targeted traffic to a new article across their network would also be able to trip off some kind of alert saying, hey, this is trending right now, therefore other people that haven't seen it yet may want to see it. And then social media, although maybe the signals don't count, it's definitely a conduit of sending that targeted audience, right, to that traffic at the end of the day. So left to be seen. I know there's a lot of theories about this out there. I have worked on sites in the past that had zero SEO and hardly any links, but they had really, really strong Facebook pages and did a lot of boosts and advertising to those audiences, which drove a lot of traffic to their site at the end of the day. And then they also did quite well from an SEO perspective, right, in terms of ranking and traffic. So maybe there is some correlation between those as well.
I can't remember who did that study. That was like 7 or 8 months ago, where he started manipulating retweets on some of their stories, and they saw the like it's triggering discovered traffic. I can't remember who did it. One last fun fact about Discover that I think your audience needs to know: most of the Google Discover traffic get registered as direct traffic in Google Analytics. Okay, so be wary of this. There's a lot of people who wrote how to dissect that kind of audience and create a segment for it and so on. Nothing is like perfect 100%, but based on my own studies, I would say 27 to 30% of your direct traffic could be attributed to Discover traffic. So it's not, hey, we increase our direct traffic by X%, our loyal audience is going as like we are quite. You have to create that segment to your best of your abilities to understand what's the percentage of your direct traffic is actually attributed, should be attributed to Google Discover.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I've been talking about direct traffic so much for the past year. I am not a fan of calling it direct traffic. I think it just should be like unknown or mystery traffic or traffic for you to figure out.
Yeah.
I still run into people that swear that all direct traffic is type-ins, right? Typing in the URL. And if anyone is an Apple fan person like you or I are, you know that when you type in a keyword, you get a Siri suggestion or a top result or something like that, which is not picked up by Google Analytics as being an organic referral, right? It goes into direct. Discover goes into direct if you're a news publisher. There's a lot of other, especially from Safari browser and their security change. There's a lot of additional direct traffic now. So let's get something clear. Direct traffic are not bookmarks.
No.
Okay.
No one's typing 100 characters or 200 characters in the browser. No one is bookmarking every new article you just wrote. Right? It's like,
Some of it is like if you're running outdoor advertising campaigns, maybe TV campaigns, there's people that are typing in your URL. But if they're typing in the URL,
URLs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're typing like search engine journal / article / new with John Shehata -- it's like,
if they remember the brand, they're probably typing in half of the URL as a typo and searching for it and then finding it, right? Or they're typing it in all the way, or as they're typing it, Apple is going to suggest the intended site, and it's that to me is search traffic at the end of the day. It's organic traffic. It has the same behavior. It's like Yelp traffic, right? One of the, with the brick and mortars, most of the brick and mortars that I work with, we take Yelp out of social and we put that into organic because that's what it is at the end of the day. And it pretty much has the same intent. So we could probably do an entire show on how to chop up your direct traffic and figure out what it is, or at least guesstimate what it is, right? Especially if you see that most of your direct traffic is not new users, right? Or most of your direct traffic is this or that. Like there's a reason for that. But no, it's not bookmarks, and no, it's not people typing in the URL. It is so hard to type in a URL now. Like you have the world working against you before you get to the .com, .net, or .org. You're gonna get so many different suggestions. It's crazy, right? So thank you for bringing that up, by the way. So we've talked a lot about Google Discover today. And Google News a bit. But one thing I wanted to get into is your tool NewzDash. Like you've published some great findings on NewzDash, and I've already shared a couple of your uncovered to Google Discover piece and things like that within the comments here. Would you mind just a quick elevator pitch, I guess, and what NewzDash is for those publishers out there that might be interested in such a tool?
Sure, absolutely. So NewzDash is simply an SEO tool specific to publishers, SEO, and editorial SEO teams, right? That's it. There's a lot of SEO tools out there, great SEO tools. I'm one of the super users for many of the SEO tools out there. The challenge is most of these tools are not focused, are not meant for publishers. We deal with real-time news optimization. We deal with trends. We deal with rankings that are 15 minutes or 30 minutes ranking checks, right? We deal with understanding other publishers' strategies and tactics, right? So these kind of features are not out there in many of the great SEO tools. So about 5 years ago or more, I said, I really need to do that, right? I need to understand Google News. Back then. It was the most dominant. Top stories was not that big, and so I started collecting data, right? And I was like understanding why publishers do better than others, right? What's their average ranking? What's their authority on different sections, right? For example, like CNN is very strong on the homepage, and national news, Fox News is also strong on the homepage, but entertainment. Fox News is way stronger in entertainment than CNN, right? And so on, right? So by understanding the section authority, the visibility in news and stuff, and slowly develop to like track top stories, right? I was like understanding like the mobile SERPs, because it keeps changing all the time, right? It was like, are people also ask important for publishers or not? Which videos are coming? Are they coming from the YouTube, or are they coming from the site, and so on? I know it's not an elevator pitch, but that's mainly the why I created it. And publicly, we start like marketing the platform about last year, and we have about maybe 20 publishers, top publishers in Europe right now.
Yeah, we've used it as Search Engine Journal and really enjoy it. I know Vahan has enjoyed looking at the data and stuff like that. And it is interesting because, to your point, Google News is so different than anything else from an SEO perspective. First of all, you're dealing with a different algorithm. You're dealing with a different index. You're going to appear for limited amounts of time. Sometimes your link is going to appear with another image next to it that links to another site. Sometimes you're going to have the same image that links to the story that your link surfaces for, and sometimes vice versa, right? So there's so many different things. Sometimes you're going to be at the top. Sometimes you're going to be in those like 3 or 4 stories below. Sometimes you're going to go up and down. Sometimes one thing that we noticed when we were working with ESPN was whenever an athlete did something stupid off the field, sports sites did not rank. There was a certain time, maybe 3-4 years ago or longer, that switched. It used to be that if an athlete went and got in an accident or got arrested and a sports site covered it, the sports sites would rank. Then TMZ launched their sports section, right? And a lot of other companies did that as well. So suddenly what happened was they were on top of the news. They were writing things in a different way that sports sites typically wouldn't write, because some of your editorial on the sports side, you need to stick to the facts. You can't kind of go into people's personal things and stuff like that as much. Yeah. At least then. So what happened was, like, during the Ray Rice incident and some other things that happened, suddenly the sports sites dropped, and then TMZ and gossip sites and traditional news sites and stuff like that would appear for the queries that you would have set up to track, like Baltimore Ravens or whatever the player's name would be or something like that, and would really throw things off. And you'd have to go back and figure out exactly what happened. Like, oh, okay, that's what happened. That explains it. So it is really interesting. We even see this in SEJ, where we'll have a lot of traffic from what we believe is personally targeted traffic, right? So when you go into Google News and all the stories basically follow what you search for all day. When I borrow my wife's phone to look for something and I go to Google News and I see it's all J-Lo stories and Fashion Week stories and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And then I go to mine and it's all sports and this and that and politics. I'm like, oh, okay, back to normal. But even that gets annoying because you have to go and change from the personalization to normal. But point being, I think a lot of our traffic at SEJ that comes from Google News is coming from people like us who are targeted with search stories or SEO stories based upon personal targeting. But every once in a while, we'll have a story that surfaces to the tech section or something like that as well. And then you really see things blow up from a traffic perspective.
I just want to stress on something that you said, right? We think of entities like people as a one-side graph, right? It's like, this is an athlete. So by default, all the sports sites will always rank well for that. But this entity has different angles to it, right? There is what they do, like something stupid or silly, a culture, or maybe entertainment. They did a movie, right, or something, right? Or they played a really good game and so on. So, for example, if you remember or they're associated with a certain location very strongly. So when you talk about Kobe Bryant, right, during the unfortunate incident, yes, you see ESPN ranking because like they have a lot of history and so on, but you also see LA Times ranking very well for all these stories because these kind of entities have more than one aspect to them, right? And you see on certain celebrities, TMZ is like killing it. And the like sports-wise, they're not a sports authority, right? But they are authority on this kind of talk, right? And so on,
It's interesting that you bring that up with the LA Times because they do have a sports section and they do have I guess, cultural section and then the news section. So seeing a story that's transformed from sports to something else but still seeing the LA Times rank is kind of an interesting component. It reminds me of Kevin Durant. He was one of the earlier investors in Postmates. And then for a while when Google was acquiring, was it Postmates? Yeah, Postmates. Uber was acquiring Postmates as part of Uber Eats. Like one day, I just like the business section blew up because it was like, oh, Kevin Durant's not only just signed this big contract, but he also is going to make X as a result of his investment with Postmates. I'm like, oh wow, it's kind of cool to see Forbes and TechCrunch and all of these sites ranking for this player's name because of this news trend that's happening. All right, and then on NewzDash, recently you published the 2021 news SEO trends and predictions that I had the pleasure to be part of. We also had a lot of great folks from the industry like Lily Ray, Joost de Valk, Barry Schwartz, Sidney Crum, so on and so forth. Carolyn Shelby contribute to as well. So what are some of the trends that really jumped out to you that some of our viewers and listeners can integrate into their strategies or should keep an eye on as they're building out their strategy for 2021?
Sure thing. And I truly enjoyed writing this piece, right? It's like you see every year, right? I think I started my piece, not yet another trends article or something, right? Because we have a lot of them, these annual trends article. But I feel the news SEO needs its place as an established SEO practice, right? Like tech SEO and content SEO and so on, right? So that's why mainly I wrote this article, and I was like, I collected the feedback from like top experts within the field that they have been doing news and editorial SEO for such a long time. So back to your question, some topics that like were very common among so many contributors. Entity analysis or topics is a big deal. If you don't understand how Google interpret entities and the topic layers and so on, I absolutely encourage you to read more about it. Start using Google NLP or natural language processing to understand how Google understands content and so on. So this is really something that multiple experts spoke about in details. Another thing also, multiple experts spoke about that the SERP is going to continue to change drastically, introducing more formats, especially around news, right? It's like the carousel will expand. So we, instead of one carousel, now we have 3. It will not only be links, but there could be like videos. There could be like, hey, these are 2 stories related to each other. So more different, diverse formats beyond links will be introduced, especially around news. So you may start thinking about what are your investments, live blogging or live posts becoming very important, and so on. Another thing also is like, I get a mixed feelings from experts. Is like some said Google will help publishers, especially new publishers who are trying to get into Google News finally this year and provide more information. And some, like myself, I don't think it's gonna happen. It has been a problem since the Google News submission became like automated, and like Google figure out your publisher, they will get you in. If you go to the Google News forums, or I think it's called groups or Google News, like I think it's called Google Groups, and I don't know, dozens every day are like saying, "Hey, help us!" It's like, we don't know how to get in Google News. There is no submission form. How to get recognized, right? So I'm not sure if this is going to be solved this year or not. Google and Danny Sullivan keep saying that their algorithm is good enough to identify new publishers and get them into the pipeline. So it has been an outcry for so many new publishers. And even the ones that got confirmation that they're in Google News, they haven't seen anything yet. So there's a lot of factors around that. Google Experience and the Core Vital, Web Core Vitals are something that a lot of people discussed. Google Discover will continue to be important for publishers. AAT is a big thing. Yeah, so go to the article. There is I summarized everything in like the top 16 or 18 things that are really most of the experts are thinking that gonna take or like we're gonna get more off as a trend and prediction for this year. But it was a great article. I enjoyed it.
It's great. Thanks so much for putting that together. You're right. News SEO or news search really needs its place. Like I think we have a lot going on for local.
Yeah.
A little bit going on for merchant. Like another trend based upon what you brought up with Discover traffic showing up in direct is that like, you know, with Google Merchant Center sending organic traffic now. That's hidden as well within GA. It's in your organic somewhere, right? So you have to UTM that up with your feed and everything else to be able to pull that out. So it's really interesting to see all of these different branches grow and blossom on their own. And thanks again from the search community and from being a publisher for all the hard work that you've put in with sharing that information, John. You've done such a great, and sorry, I don't mean to get all sentimental here, but you've done such a great job over the years on the ABC side and now at the Conde Nast side. And the fact that you're sharing that as opposed to keeping it bottled in means a lot, and it's very helpful. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so we're about out of time. It was really a pleasure having you today. Where can folks find you online, John?
Oh, I'm everywhere. I'm very active on Twitter. So Shehata. I'm in LinkedIn, and a lot of people ask me questions there, and I reply. I try to help as much as I can as my time permits me. I also started a new clubhouse.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yes. Yeah, every Tuesday, mainly specifically talking about news and editorial SEO. So it's every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Standard Time. I wish if they can have a recurring chat instead of you creating it every week. So where else? These are the two main places that I'm in.
How do you like Clubhouse, by the way? Like,
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it a lot. I think it's funny because it reminds me that when they submitted their product into Product Hunt, they only got like 100 votes. Right? It's just a constant reminder. You have the best ideas out there. People don't see it, but you see it, right? And so don't let that discourage you from like going further and like seeing your idea coming to life. So I like it. It's lacking few features. I think they will add it. I don't think they expected the growth. I think 2 weeks ago the servers went down or like
Elon was on, like Elon and Kanye, right? Weren't they? And then Elon just invited Putin to be on Clubhouse. Like, wait, between like Dogecoin and Clubhouse, like does he just pick out these things?
I don't know. It just looks in a bag. I'm enjoying Clubhouse. How about you?
You know, I downloaded it when it first started to get some buzz, and a lot of what I saw was coaching and life coaching and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to claim my user ID and check back. But between yourself, Kevin Indig, I've seen a lot of other people out there that have set up some serious, great conversations in rooms. So it sounds like the value of Clubhouse comes with the moderation and ideas and good people putting together a good conversation, right? Yep. So like as you all are starting to lead that charge, I'll probably be back into it.
You should soon. Join us next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday?
Yes, okay. Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. It's a little bit early, but even other people from California join us that time. They just got their coffee and they join. I'm gonna send
I'll wake up, check my Robinhood, get my coffee, and then join. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. John, thanks so much. We dropped some NewzDash links. I'll drop some of your social profile stuff in here so folks can follow you. And we'll talk to you soon. This has been John Shehata and Loren Baker with SEJ Show. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.